to talk about is, which may have been discussed in the last call, is there's a UIP and a beginning of implementation up for uh, transparent addresses. So basically, uh, there's been the ongoing unfortunate incompatibility issues for the USDC transfers that were introduced by the Noble upgrade, and basically, although there's a kind of one-line fix, getting Circle to run through their process to actually deploy that has been slow and difficult. Yelena from Noble said that she's going to post an update on the forum soon. But in the meantime, for Penumbra, it's clear that the move is to just kind of press forward with, let's say, like adversarial interoperability, right? So things should just be fixed on the Penumbra side to prevent this from being a problem. And to that end, there's a new UIP, which I can link in the chat. One sec. Sorry, just slow at using Discord. So this UIP, actually, I realized that we've done a oopsie and had a conflict of the UIP numbers, but basically what we figured out by carefully looking at the address format for Penumbra addresses is that there's a way to um, create one specific Penumbra address for user's wallet that we can create this truncated encoding of and have that fit in 32 bytes and have that look and feel exactly like another Cosmos address. So we're going to call these transparent addresses because unlike a normal Penumbra address, there's only one of them per wallet. And so if someone were to, use one of these multiple times, those different uses, for instance, in an IBC transfer, if you transfer into the same address, those transfers are linkable. But unlike other systems like Zcash or Namada, where the transparent address corresponds to a transparent account and all of the activity is visible, the transparent addresses on Penumbra actually do just like deposit into the shielded pool. But what we figured is that if we use the word transparent address, it kind of puts users in the right mindset and avoids kind of, if it's actually more private than people might think, that's like the safe direction. And so this can go in a Penumbra chain upgrade. And we believe that this is going to be like a workaround for the Noble issues. So that's the first update. The second update is we've been talking about a new DEX front end that's been in development. So I don't know if Erwan, if you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm running it right now, and I can share a sort of peek at what's in store. But at a high level, it's a complete retake on the interface and you'll see it's quite different from, I don't know if anyone here has used CLI Pickle to open positions, but it's quite different from that experience. My opinion is much better, and a lot of design thoughts have gone into it. So just waiting for it to start up. There's still, it's still pre-alpha software, so there are some rough edges, but you'll see it's pretty cool too.
For my part, I think it's some of the coolest pre-alpha software I've ever seen in my entire life. So just wanted to, say that.
Yeah, it's honestly, yes, I agree. It's self serving, but I think that's right too. So this is on a testnet instance, on the devnet instance, sorry, on my local host. So I spinned up a network, and I'm gonna play with it. So we are just looking at a imaginary test USD pair, and we look at the order book. Here, your positions are going to show up here. There's a tab underneath for trades, and it closely resemble sort of a well-known like exchange interface, except that well, you can do a lot more with it. So there are three, I think, important things. First, the swap interface does not just live with Prax, but you actually uh, have an ability here to submit a swap as a market buy or market sell, and this is like what the swap really maps to. And the two other newcomers are the limit order and range liquidity. And the limit order is, I think, pretty well understood. You just specify price and an inventory you want to require, and eventually you get filled, possibly anyway, and your order closes once it's totally exhausted. And the third type is the range liquidity one, and this one is really interesting. So I think this is a big step up in the sort of toolbox for people who want to provide liquidity, like that interface. Suppose you have an order book like this that is just like very thin, with almost like stub-like orders. You can provision a specific amount of test USD you want. So let's put 10. You specify an upper bound on the range that you want to provide into. So suppose we say we want to do like, I don't know, like 50, and a lower bound, let's say like 1. You specify a fee tier. So the fee tier is for each of your position. How much are you going to? How much is the position is going to accrete fees every time it gets hit by order flow. So the higher it is, the more you get into your position, the more rewarding it is. But of course, others can compete with you on that. But for the sake of the argument, let's put like 0.5, and the number of position kind of controls the granularity of each order, and how many price intervals are you going to cover with each order? How much of the price domain you're going to cover with each order? So suppose we say open 5 positions. We're going to have the price confirmation. We have the transaction plan. Here it's also totally legible. You can inspect actually what goes into it. You can see actually, like, so we're currently developing it, so this is very useful, but there are ways to interpret this, to parse it into also like sort of more actionable price information for users. Here it's like a ratio of coefficients. So the price, we said the upper bound of the range was going to be
The pop-up doesn't show up in the screen share.
oh, true, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a
Yeah.
pop-up. There's a pop-up. Okay, I'll just skip that one then. So I approve the transaction. There's a transaction plan that is legible to users, is the main takeaway, and boom, the order book has been filled with orders. And well, since no one else was doing it, I am going to personally capture all the order flow there. So if there's a lot of volume, it's pretty good, for the LPs. Same thing with limit orders. You can specify, hey, when is, I don't know, like 35 test USD, sell 5 and this closely mimic like the standard limit order form. I think there's a very cool thing at the bottom, which is trading fee free, and explains to you, oops, I think I have to hover, explains to you like why. And so I think that's like a pretty neat hint that a lot of you know trading platforms of various kinds have rebates or things like that, but it's rarely so visible to the user. And I found, like, talking to people, that it's frequently confusing for them. What is, what are the fees? There's always like hidden fees, and you discover that, like, if you do a market order, actually you're going to be charged 50 bips, and that more savvy people are going to open orders and trade that immediacy for better execution. So I really love that it's just like, yeah, it just tells you, like, it's free.
One
I have a
one
question.
thing that's sorry, one thing I just want to tack onto that is one of the really important design features of the Penumbra DEX is that from it kind of matches this product idea of, if I'm a user, right, and I'm trying to buy, let's say I'm trying to buy ETH, and we have two liquidity providers. One of them is willing to sell me ETH, one ETH for $1,000 with a 10 bips fee, and the other is saying, well, I'll sell you ETH for $1,010, but with a 0% fee. As a user, those actually are like totally the same to me, because the effective price in either case is going to be the same. And the Penumbra DEX is designed to kind of take this into account. So every single LP gets to set their own fee tier, like how much of the trade are they going to capture with the fee. But the positions are ordered by effective price. And so as a user, the DEX is going to go and find you the best price, like inclusive of fees. And the LPs have to compete with each other to see, like, who's going to provide the best price versus who's going to capture the most fees. And rather than having the whole protocol try to have, like, oh, what is the, like, fee tier, and like, how are we going to control this with governance, and how is, like, whatever, blah blah blah. You just say, like, the market can decide, like, what is the cost of liquidity, and like, how does that go into the prices.
Yeah, it's a pain for LPs on V3, for example, in V3, to like pick the right pool. Like, is it the 25 bips one? Is it the 5 bips one? Like, which one should be what? So I'm going to send to approve the transaction. You can't see the transaction dialog, but similar for Orange Liquidity, here you have a transaction plan that tells you, here's what you're spending, here's where it's going. So the change is going back to account 0, and some of it is going into to be burned to mint the position. So I'm approving, now waiting for confirmation, and it's going to show up in the list of positions. I forget exactly the price. I think it's the 35 one that we opened. So it's right here. And right below, so the still working on the rendering so that it's nice and pretty and correct. But right below, you have you can basically discover and explore your positions and inspect their history by clicking on them. And same thing with the market order. This is just like a swap. You can sell, buy, sell. On certain pairs, we're going to gray out the. Sorry, on certain pairs you might find that the button is grayed out. Cool. So you have to enter something and it just becomes actionable. Yeah. Is there any questions so far? I can pause a bit and
There's an unrelated question in the chat, but we can answer that in a second. The related question I had, yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, Marat. It does look as easy as it gets. But what I wanted to maybe pin into a little bit was like what you were talking about a moment ago, Henry, which is like this fee-tier reconciliation thing that the protocol does. One question that comes up a lot of the time when it comes to the construction of like DEXs or just like trading interfaces or environments like that is like, where is the revenue, if that makes sense, in terms of like the question. And from what I understand here, and like I've been hopefully working on this long enough to totally get it. Maybe I don't. It looks like the users make the revenue, right? Like you're muted, Henry.
So let me show something else. So one of the other features that's pretty cool about the new Explorer is that there's also, in addition to like a trading interface that is useful for, right? So there's kind of this like hierarchy of like simple to detailed, right? So the simple way to do a swap is like you just go to Minifront and you put in like I want to swap X to Y and it just like does it and the DEX figures out how to do the best thing. And then there's this trading interface that shows like, okay, here's like more of the details. Here's all the charts. Here's the route book. Like, there's some bugs. So this is, as of this morning, there's some issues here, but pre-alpha. And then the most kind of detailed is like, suppose I want to inspect like what's really going on in the kind of market structure. And one of the things that is interesting and that you could do now with this new Explorer is you can look at an inspect page that shows you a specific liquidity position. And this liquidity position actually is the most ever executed against LP position on the DEX. So here's like a timeline of all the executions. If I scroll all the way down, there's 11,500 more trades against this one LP that were, are skipped and not rendered. But this position, someone opened it about 9 weeks ago with 100 USDC of liquidity, and since then, it's it earned about almost $140 in fees, and it's processed about a bit more than $50,000 worth of volume. This volume and fees breakdown is showing, okay, where's the order flow for that position coming from? And it's coming from basically all over the DEX. One of the things that's really interesting about Penumbra's design, where you have this kind of it's almost effectively like an on-chain intent and solver system. When a user specifies a trade, like somebody wanted to trade from Atom to USDC, like it might be that there's some other liquidity that it could use that is from something in USDY. And so because this whoever made this USDY to USDC stable swap position, the DEX can basically route, it can basically bridge liquidity between these different stablecoin pairs. And so what this does is it basically solves the problem of liquidity fragmentation on the DEX. And that's basically because although the engine is there, the overall product experience just like isn't, and that's what we're fixing now with this new interface. In spite of that, because that engine is so powerful, it's been able to bridge together a lot of disparate pieces of liquidity and be very, very capital efficient. So one of the things that's really cool about Penumbra is that it's basically trying to reward the LPs that are most effective at providing the liquidity. And the LPs who are able to provide the best and most efficient liquidity can win big. Obviously, you know, this is still kind of early days and kind of small time, but I think it's impressive that this person was able to turn, you know, $100 into $230.
Well, and that's actually like the coolest thing about it, right? Like in an early market, you have the ability to really capture a lot of positions. So what I'm super excited about is that as soon as this DEX Explorer is live, like there's like huge opportunity for people to engage in a market and capture like a ton of value really, really early. And I think, I mean, you emphasized it a couple times here, but like I really want to emphasize to all the people who are out there like listening, the coolest thing about this, the coolest thing about Penumbra's DEX, in my opinion, is that you can reconcile your trade kind of no matter what. So you don't have to deal with the pool chaos that you'll have on other exchanges where you end up with this like the pool has to exist and you have to trade through that pool. So we've like there's been a lot of emphasis in this in the stream so far on like the particularities of it, and I think that's important and we need to focus on that. But to hyper simplify it, the big difference between Penumbra and like other dexes is that Penumbra will reconcile your trade so long as there is liquidity in any amount of token that helps you reconcile that trade. And then so that means that that's just on the user side, right? Like the user side.
And to that point, right? Like pools. What is a pool? As a user, why do I have to care about pools? Why do I have to care about fee tiers? Why do I have to care about any of this? Like, if I want to be doing, and to the comments in the DEX or the chat about like, oh, this is like a very like complicated thing, right? Like, yes, this is the kind of like the like advanced trading interface, kind of at that far end of the spectrum. But all of this system exists so that when a user wants to do a swap, right, they just plug in their intent, and the DEX does the best thing for them. They don't have to think about pools. They don't have to think about fee tiers. They get an estimate of like, okay, here's what the price impact is going to be. Here's what you're going to get. And that's possible because this system on the back end solves for optimality, right?
But I mean, essentially, Henry, a lot of what you're saying is like what you've said many times before, and I'm glad that there's some like new people in the audience to hear this, which is that like Penumbra is built to be as close to the user as possible, right? So like the interaction of the software that that Penumbra Labs has developed and that can be deployed on top of the Penumbra network is designed so that like all of this complexity is like hyper simplified into a very common and easy to understand experience across all levels of expertise, and like that's super exciting.
Let me give it another example of that, right? Like, okay, we've got this whole like crazy sort of, I'll just pull up again this view of like, here's all this volume that was able to be served by this one position. Like, it's kind of crazy to be like, oh, well, like, yeah, we have this like giant fancy trading system and that enables this stuff. But let's start at like just the highest level thing the user wants to do with Penumbra. I want to deposit an asset, and then I want to privately withdraw to another chain, right? Let's just think about that, right? I want to take my atoms from the Cosmos Hub and I want to shield them. And then later I want to like withdraw like 10 Osmo to osmosis so that I can, you know, start some new meme coin or whatever, or use the token factory or do whatever kind of DeFi stuff we want, right? This is like private chain abstraction. If I want to do that as a user, there's actually an enormous amount of stuff that has to exist. And it's kind of like back-end machinery that I shouldn't have to know about, but that does need to be there to make that work. So one is, for instance, in Penumbra, when you deposit into Penumbra, every time you deposit, you specify your client will like automatically generate a new deposit address for that IBC transfer so that it's unlinkable. So as a user, I don't have to think about here's like all the different addresses. If I go to Penumbra, do I then have to shield? It's like another action, all this complexity. Like I just I do a transfer, and when it transfers into Penumbra, I know that I'm private. In order to enable that, we had to build this whole system of having many different addresses that all point to the same account that users can keep track of. And that's kind of, you know, one piece of complexity that exists behind the scenes to provide that user experience of I transfer in, now it's private. Now I have my atom inside of Penumbra. Cool, I'm keeping it there. This is like my kind of private home base. And now I want to go and do some DeFi action on Osmosis. And I have a new wallet for that. And I want to fund that wallet. But now I don't want to send Atom. I want to send Osmo. I want to send like 10 Osmo to just like start off doing some new action. Only Penumbra can provide me with that capability because I can just trade my atoms privately for however much Osmo I want to withdraw and then withdraw that. And that's possible on Penumbra because you can transact within the shielded pool. You don't have to just leave, right? Whereas all of the other systems, even if there's a multi-asset shielded pool, you can't actually do anything inside the shielded pool without having to leave.
Find another counterparty to trade with, right? Like you'd have to find someone who you actually like holds the asset you want, and you'd have to agree to making that transfer, and that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's like a weird, So there's a lot of these kind of things where behind the scenes, there's all this infrastructure that exists in order to allow the like frictionless and seamless user experience of I transfer into the system, now I'm private. Now I can transact inside the system. I know those transactions are private. Now, when I want to withdraw, I can withdraw the assets that I want and go directly to that other system. And I'm able to do that efficiently, even without some kind of like, you know, really deep, you know, set of pools or whatever. Like, to put it another way, right? Like right now, you know, being honest, like the amount of liquidity in Penumbra is like Dune levels, right? Like we are Arrakis right now. But like this advanced like DEX engine that's able to say like, oh, well, there's liquidity on this pair of this or like this edge of the graph, and I can combine it together. Like the fact that a, you know, to USDC trade can actually run through somebody's like USDY to USDC stable swap in order to pick up extra liquidity. This is basically like the still suit of DEXs, right? And as we are
wait, still suit of DEXs.
Yes.
So what you mean by that is that there is recirculated internal capital. Just wanted to make sure, because some people haven't read, some people have not read.
Okay,
Dune.
so the metaphor in Dune, like you have it's like the desert planet that's hostile to life itself. That's, you know, kind of a good metaphor for building a privacy project. And like water is very precious.
Bob,
this is actually the mainnet data.
Yeah, this is on mainnet data. This is happening right now. And the DEX interface that you're looking at right now is something that you will be able to interact with I don't know what, in like the
in,
next
like,
month, Henry? That's your goal?
I definitely like basically the thing is that like there's a few places, and like probably you might have seen this in like Erwan's demo, where like there's like one part that's like, oh, this not handling like the denom exponent correctly or something, and you really want to make sure that all those bugs are gone before people like play with it, because like it would be sad if there was like, oh, the price is off by like a factor of 1,000,000 or something, not optimal. But this is actually the live like mainnet data. This is a like real position that exists on mainnet that someone created with the command line tooling, I assume. And this is a real example of how even in this kind of liquidity constrained environment, where like the process of like the process of doing like liquidity provision on the command line is like eating glass, right? And that sucks. And it's going to be fixed by this new interface where you can just like plug in your stuff. But like someone went and did all this, and the DEX engine has been able to use that liquidity very, very efficiently. So as we transition out of this, like, kind of like the infrastructure and the engine all exists, and there's just some missing kind of front end user experience, we're going to see how the power of this matching engine is going to enable really, really good user experiences, right? Like as a user, I don't want to have to think about pools. I don't want to have to think about all of this stuff. I just want to be able to make a swap and have that efficiently get processed.
But not just users, right? Also, this is the first DEX that gives LPs a wider range of like liquidity opportunities off of a single pair. That's actually like huge, right? So if you're higher tier, you know how to do LP stuff, you know, set your tier, you know how to whatever your fee curve you want to do. Like this means that you're not going to just make money off of like a paired position that you might hold on a pool. It actually means that pool, the like position, not pool, that position that you express could be used by any number of trades, provided that it's a good position. This is what Henry was talking about earlier with like showing that one position, like reconciling a bunch of stuff. So I just wanted to like triple emphasize that. Like this is the coolest thing is like LPs make money and users make money. So like everybody, like this is a win-win situation, and like those don't exist. So like this is like a win-win situation, which means that it does exist, which is why it's like from the future and doesn't make any sense and yet does make sense.
Something cool is about that part is also typically people talk about decentralized technologies as needing to catch up on traditional finance counterparts. And I think here it's kind of cool because it's not just like reaching feature parity, because not everyone can like see your alpha and see your trades and everything. It's going ahead of this, and I think ahead in the sense of you get like really good execution quality and execution against the entire graph in something, in a way that is in like traditional finance, like a paid and like pretty expensive service, like execution services, where a broker will like plug into different venues and kind of like try to match you at the best possible price. I mean, depends if it's equities or whatever, but in crypto, it can be like 50, 75 bips, sometimes more, and extremely expensive. So 100 bips means like you pay like a percent basically of the trade. So very, very profitable. And if you want to do it yourself, you sort of have to be like very, like not necessarily very sophisticated, but pretty sophisticated to plug into the right APIs and chunk things and monitor the prices and spread it out, etc. So here it's just like the fundamental like way you interact with the DEX is either you
Mhm.
submit a market order or you open a liquidity position, and those are like the two fundamental, most simple ways, like irreducible ways to like participate in the market.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's like
I mean, it's
we're
just
getting
a
ahead of
huge
the
deal.
curve, so it's cool. Yeah.
No, yeah, it's setting a new standard. It's actually like taking cryptocurrency and like evolving what's available to like economy, democratizing liquidity provision, democratizing like access to like when like when thinking about like the idea that like economic freedom is meant to be what's enabled by crypto, like this is actually I think what people are talking about is access to markets like in a fully democratized, fully uh like like permissionless way and with the additional benefit of privacy when you take part in that. And so like that's like access to being able to like make money the same way that banks make money was like the first step toward that was like, oh, we can do Uni v3 stuff. You can provide liquidity on Uniswap. You can, but these things are like inaccessible. And you've actually like I think this is what's amazing to me is like there's been an advance here like that goes beyond like you're saying traditional finance in what it means to have democratized economics that are more made available to the market. So I think this is super exciting. Bob, I just want to make sure that your comment was actually, no, we already said that. This is like all mainnet data because the network is like live and people are like interacting with the network as is. And that's like, it means that there's like, the sky's kind of the limit from here if this is the kind of stuff we're looking at with relatively low liquidity. Hell yeah. Well, thanks for that share, Henry and Erwan. It's really, really cool. It's very exciting to see that progress. Penumbra. It's nice. Cool. For our part, there's like it's really cool to see the progress on the Penumbra Lab side with this software. We have to put some work in on the Radiant side now that we know that this is like kind of progressing forward, and to make people a little bit more aware of it once it's ready. Once it's ready, right? So, yeah, go ahead, Henry.
There is one other update that
Oh, hey, Max. Thanks for joining us.
that is worth sharing, which is that there's a new feature for that should be live in the Penumbra front ends, which is there's now integrated skip deposit widget. Oh, I don't know if I can get the demo to work on the call, but there's an integrated skip deposit widget that's now part of the normal Penumbra front end. And the manual deposit flow also is still there because basically the skip flow requires talking to the skip servers, and they have some kind of like API waitlist for rate limiting because there's infrastructure and all this stuff. But it should work for most of the default front ends, and so right in the front end you can just kind of go directly to assets on Penumbra. And that's a big boost to the user experience. So there's
Hell yeah,
some
that's really cool.
full like V2 designs that are being worked on by Radiant for new UI, and excited to have those get shipped out early in the new year. But in the meantime, that seemed like a really kind of low-hanging fruit for improving the user experience. So that was one more minor improvement.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Super exciting. Um, yeah, I just kind of wanted to turn to the audience. We've got like about 15 minutes left, and I just wanted to have all you say that like we're really appreciative of you all joining us. I actually see people from a lot of different domains that I've seen across crypto, so it's like cool to see you here, Dave, for example, and Max from NIM. It's really cool to see Max from NIM here. Um, we could really use like your help, like having people understand what's being made here. Obviously, we're doing our work on the Radiant side to try to like get this out there and have people understand it. And you can expect to see more of that here in the future. Just sharing features and things like that. But if you are aware of like places that this could be shared either on your own socials or in line with other people's, like I don't know, I think, as far as I understand, Dave, I think you run a podcast, and I think we'd be like more than willing to, I mean, I'd ask you, Henry, if you'd be willing to get on that podcast, but Dave would have to like invite you. But like getting this out there so that more people can see it would be really, really exciting. And I think everyone who's in here like understands that this is like pretty vanguard technology. That's a significant step forward, but we need to get it in people's hands. So I want to actually like turn to something that Murat asked earlier, which is like, where is it? You said planning to implement other wallets, or is it impossible for now? If not, please work the other way around. Implement SegWit, Taproot, Sol, EVM, and IBC to Prax. So I don't want to speculate here because like Radiant isn't building software necessarily on our side, but like Henry, I'd be curious about like, do you have any ideas or like kind of like a loose vision
Yeah,
about like what it is that
yeah,
Penumbra could constitute for people in terms of like their
yeah.
interaction with other domains?
So the long-term vision of Penumbra is that like Penumbra is kind of your shielded home base, and you can go out and interact with any chain from inside of that shielded home base. And
Mhm.
one of the reasons that we wanted to build in Cosmos, launch in Cosmos, is because Cosmos has the best interop, right? But
Mhm.
it's still kind of like currently limited to sort of like the local neighborhood. And that's going to change in 2025. We've got IBC Eureka, which is like the V2 version of IBC. This is going to have like native connection with Solana and Ethereum. And as that like advances in interop come into play, Penumbra will be able to pick up on all those network effects and connect to more and more domains. And all of the work that we've done to allow to make sure that all of the protocol design and the cryptography is really lined up behind the user experience in a way that users can like safely not have to think about, is going to get carried through to all of these other ecosystems. So the long-term vision of Penumbra is you can store your assets in Penumbra. It's your home base. It's totally private. And then you can transact within that private zone to do sort of basic spot trading. But if you want to do more like the full sort of functionality of DeFi, then you can go out into the rest of the ecosystem, transact privately, and then return to your shielded home base. And so that basically acts as basically like a kind of private version of chain abstraction, where all of these other transparent chains that have programmability systems, they have maybe different security properties, they have different privacy properties, right? Like maybe people go and build some system where like everything's in SGX and it does cool stuff, but it's like less, private or secure. Well, you could go and interact with that system from inside of Penumbra. And that provides this kind of like shielded gateway to this cross-chain feature. So that's kind of the longer term vision. It's making sure that we have all of the sort of fundamental protocol pieces lined up so that we can provide a really seamless user experience. And I think that even the example of just transferring in and out of Penumbra is a good one, where we wanted the user's understanding to be, I do an IBC I transfer to my Penumbra account, and now everything is private. And to make sure that that guarantee is like what the user is actually getting, there's all of this protocol design that's like, okay, well, we have all this system where there's different addresses for the same wallet, and it's all kind of automatically managed, and it like auto generates new ones for every transfer. And we make it so that, if there's an error with the transfer, it gets refunded to this other like ephemeral address that's all like, blah, 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 blah. And all of this stuff like exists kind of behind the scenes to make it so that the behavior that the user gets is what they want without having to think about it. And a lot of the time when people talk about improving UX for blockchains, they kind of miss this crucial part that like the technical properties of the system actually have to match. Like that's what's so hard about making the user experience good, is it's not just about like having like pretty buttons. Like we're going to get like really pretty buttons on Penumbra.
We have really pretty buttons.
Prettier buttons every day, but it's possible to build that in a way that's actually honest. It's not like, oh, here's this like pretty button on this thing that like fundamentally doesn't actually do what users expect. I mean, or the meme about like, oh, all my apes are gone, right? Like, okay, on the one hand, this is funny. I'm not gonna lie. But on the other hand, like what's actually how is it that somebody just like loses all their apes? It's that they're using this system that misleads them about what the effects of their transaction are. Like, how is it that someone can be tricked into clicking approve transaction and like losing all their apes? It's like, well, the technology is bad. Like, and it should be presenting something to the user that they can understand. Like the user expectations have to actually line up with the technical properties. And what we're going to see in 2025 with Penumbra is we've have the kind of accumulated like good protocol design and the sort of fundamental pieces set up correctly so that we can make these really compelling user experiences. And to use this like Arrakis meme that we're doing in the chat, like if you can fight and win on Arrakis, you can win anywhere. And so we've built the system for this like maximally, difficult, like hard mode thing. Like it's a privacy chain. How do I even get my account balance? Well, like, oops, we had to build a whole ultralight node that like lives in the wallet and syncs all your data. And that's hard. But once it's done, now, the RPC load is way less. So the chain is way more scalable. And yeah.
So this is an interesting question, Bob, that you asked. I want to answer it in a second. It's a specific one. But this is one of the issues with Monero, actually, in and of itself. But we'll talk about that in a second. What I actually wanted to refer to was one of the more interesting implications of what it is that you just said, which is like building a maximally useful privacy system means that you can do all of the things that you enjoy in crypto, which I think the basic value propositions are like buying crypto and trading, and like everything else is kind of a derivative of that for the most part. And like transacting. But it's honestly like to be able to do it in a way that is better, specifically because the privacy gives you a competitive edge, right? Like that's the part I think that I'm getting from what it is that you're saying, Henry. So like I to me that's like the big implication here is like doing things from the private side. Like so everything like you're saying, all these like the complexity that has been built into the system as part of the lore of like how to have desert power and like how to sand, like how to like, you know, like to get the spice flowing correctly, is that you must hide from like everyone else and you have to be able to learn how to do it correctly. So like, well, hide maybe is the wrong word, but you should be able to like do so in independently and in without anyone seeing you do it. So to me, that's that's the really exciting part. You like participate in Penumbra specifically because it gives you a competitive edge when making money in crypto that you don't otherwise get. So, do you want to answer the Monero question? I think this is like an interesting one. It's always interesting to talk about this from the structural side of problems.
Yeah, I mean, the issue with Monero is that another kind of like Gen 1 like privacy chains is that like because they're Gen 1 chains, they don't have good interop, right? Like in terms
Yeah,
of like the history of blockchains, first we like made blockchains, and then there was a whole bunch of like first gen blockchain designs, and like all of the blockchains that are, you know, still around from that generation are in like some way kind of like Lindy, but they weren't really designed to be interoperable. And
yeah,
actually the huge advance of Cosmos was it was the first time that somebody had built a blockchain design and like a consensus engine. Like Tendermint is so unique in that to this day it's still the only like BFT consensus system that was really designed to support light clients and bridging. So yeah, doing a Monero to uh, Penumbra bridge. As far as I know, with the Monero community, I think there's a lot of hesitation about having any kind of like, you know, committee-based system. There's also some, you know, long-standing tension with like Monero versus Zcash and so on. I think it would be really cool for someone to build. And I think, actually, I think one of the Monero devs that I know is working on a project called, I think, Sarai, that maybe can do bridging, but I'm not sure.
yeah. I mean, it's
I think Newt
basically the
worked on
answer there.
Monero bridging as well.
What's that? Go ahead.
I think
What?
Newt from Austria. So on Monero bridging, I think.
Oh yeah, we should ask her.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just to answer your question with like the possibility, Bob, like the main thing is to like outline the fact that like these Gen 1 chains were built for a paradigm, like Henry said, where like the idea was supposed to be that you would only use Monero or you'd only use Zcash, or you like before that you would only use Bitcoin. And uh, you know, so it's difficult to retrofit this stuff, which is why building something like Penumbra that is like setting all of the rules at the baseline, setting all the rules at the what would you want like from first principles, like the base first principles of the system are designed with the learnings of all of the blockchains that precede it, so that it's prepared for not committing the same faults. Because if Penumbra was built to be a closed ecosystem and didn't have interoperability,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be very useful, right? So that's the reason that it's difficult to integrate with something like Monero or Zcash or Bitcoin. This is the reason like there's not really like there are Bitcoin bridges, but like they're not like a hugely used thing. There's also like a community reason for that. There's like a cultural reason. But yeah, it's just something I wanted to point out, Bob.
One thing to tack onto that is that like so prior to starting Penumbra, I worked on Zcash, and
Mm.
there's some ways that like Penumbra is, you know, an attempt to be like lessons learned from mistakes of Zcash, and you know now we've made mistakes of our own that we'll, you know, recover from. So that's kind of how like, you know, the cycle of life. But one of the things about Zcash is that because it didn't have a way to interoperate with other systems, um, everything had to run through exchanges. right? And then the centralized exchanges become this choke point over the whole system. And that's why, for instance, like, why is it that Zcash has like the whole like Bitcoin like T address like transparent pool thing? It's because of like needing to have exchange support. And for Penumbra, part of the kind of design theory or product theory is the entire rest of the ecosystem should be the transparent pool for Penumbra. And by having native IBC, like Penumbra can permissionlessly connect to all of these other ecosystems. And because of that, it can also use some of those other like the tooling that exists also in the ecosystem. So for example, like, right now the custody story for Penumbra is like not where we'd like it to be. So, there's a Ledger app that's in development. There's a threshold signing thing, but you have to use the command line. It's kind of horrible. And so there's these kind of tooling issues that are just difficult. But because we have IBC, there can be like on osmosis, and then anybody who has like a custody setup for dealing with osmosis assets, if there's like qualified custodians that are using that, like they can hold that IBC token, and that allows this kind of like gradual like development, but in a way that's still totally permissionless, right? We're not compromising on the decentralization of the system, but there's a way for people to kind of work around the pieces that are still the kind of rough edges. So IBC, I think, like Penumbra kind of is going to ride the wave of IBC. We saw recently this week, there's an announcement about Skip taking over the ICF. I'm super, super excited about that and really hopeful that that's going to be a great kind of like product reboot for the ecosystem. And I'm looking forward to as IBC expands, Penumbra will be able to kind of pick up those network effects. So Monero would be awesome. But I'm also really excited about Solana and Ethereum.
Yeah, I mean, I think the leaving note here, because we're at time, is like, this is like really indicative of like the fact that like there's a good song playing and we're about to hit the nice crescendo, which is like having IBC Eureka like increase the compatibility of having IBC Eureka increase the compatibility of the Cosmos with like other ecosystems at the exact same time that Penumbra is like doing all this like massive lift to create a really good user experience, like bodes quite well for Penumbra. So I'm very excited about that. So I'm excited to see these next steps happen. So anyway, thank you everyone for attending the call. Yeah, you have something else you want to say, Henry? Sorry.
No, I was doing this is my habit that I do whenever I'm on a conference call and it's like winding down. I do the like half hand wave.
Okay, that's funny.
That's a force of habit.
No, it's all good. Yeah, again, we would love anyone who wants to amplify, please do. We didn't really get time to talk about it, but we are looking at some like community programs that'll be coming in the future. Those are kind of like also pre-alpha, but not pre-alpha enough to be able to discuss them. But we wanted to hint at them. So those of you who are in the audience, please look out for that. There will be some of those in the future.
One thing I would say too is like through the whole history of the project, like it's been very much like build in public. So there's not really like everything is on GitHub, and it's really exciting to have a kind of narrower group of people who are like excited, who can kind of share things with in advance of having like wider attention. But all the stuff that anybody's working on is all on GitHub anyway. So if someone can for all three.
I actually like another thing I'll just like throw out there to anyone who's in the audience. We do have a beta program for people who want to like test pre-alpha software.
Yeah.
And I think that the DEX Explorer is on the horizon. Yeah, Amber, do you want to talk about that for a couple seconds before we end the call?
Absolutely. Right now, it's for people who are excited
Yeah.
about Penumbra. And basically, we tag you in. But also, if you're excited about it, let me know.
Yeah. That way
I
you
think
can
for the
go
DEX
try the stuff and
interface,
get hyped.
we'd probably share it with the beta group first.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping we can do. So that'd be really exciting if we can do that. If you want to play around with the DEX interface before it actually like officially launches out into the world, get in touch and we'll try to see if we can add you to the beta program and you can test it out.
Yeah, cool.
Amazing. Thank you all
See
so
y'all.
much.
Bye.
Have a great week. Bye.